it's usually falls into certain patterns that I'm very comfortable with. And so it's on me to say, look, you don't have to understand the software. You just have to tell me how you want to fit into your business. And then it's my job to make you comfortable and show you things and put it on the screen so that you know that it's real and then you can react to it. And I'm telling you, almost everybody has used enough software at this point that they know what they're looking for.
Hello, and welcome to the My Future Business Show. It's Rick Nuske here. I'm your host. It is so wonderful to be back with you hosting the show after a little bit of a hiatus over the festive season. So I hope you're doing wonderfully well. If it's your first time joining us on the show, it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, on today's show, I'm excited to welcome founder and CEO of Ecor Rouge, Mr. Jay Grieves. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Hey, Rick, good to hear from you.
Absolutely fantastic to have you here. Now, during the call, you and I will be talking about how Ecor Rouge builds, fixes, and provides tech services for clients. And we're going to explore your insights on software development, business building, and productivity. So, to say that there's a little bit to unpack there would be an understatement.
So, should we talk twice as fast to squeeze in twice as much, or just plan a follow-up?
No, we can just mosey on through the call and take as long as it takes to share your wonderful message. So where are you calling in from today?
So I live in a little town in South Alabama called Fairhope. So we're on the eastern shore, Mobile Bay, really far down south, beautiful area. And I've been here for a little over 10 years.
A lot of people, transition from, I guess, where they used to grow up to where you are now. Where did you grow up, and why was it that you moved to where you moved to?
Yeah, so I lived all over the place. Early years in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lived on the East Coast outside of DC.
Yep.
Lived on the West Coast, worked at Microsoft Research. So I lived in Seattle. Lived in Houston, Texas before here. So just bounced all over. I'm here because I can work anywhere. So this is a beautiful place where I used to visit my sister. And then every visit, she would always say, oh, you should move here. You should move here. And finally, I did. So I get to choose, and we chose here.
Family's one thing, but what have you grown to love about the place?
It is, again, it's beautiful. It's quiet. People here are really nice. So I like living near water. So again, we're right on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay, and it has this neat thing that only happens here and in Japan, where sometime during the summer, the water goes super calm and all the oxygen disappears from the water. And so essentially the sea life starts to kind of suffocate, and it runs up on the shore. And it's called Jubilee. And so people run up and down the shore with buckets, just pulling out shrimp and fish and crabs and like everything you can imagine. And it's sort of like more than you could possibly eat. And so it's a big festive
very
experience.
Abundant. So that's a natural occurrence?
It's a natural occurrence.
Wow.
No one can predict it. It's always early morning. It's almost always in the summer, usually around early to mid-July. And no one knows when it's going to happen. And then when it does, people will ring bells on the shore and everybody comes out to a big feast.
Isn't that fascinating? Thank you very much for sharing. Now, you talk about being near the beach. I always wonder, myself, I love walking down the beach with my dogs. What's your thing?
I really like the vastness of water. So I like being near the beach. I like looking out and not being able to see the end. And so, a body of water where it goes past the horizon. I feel like it's one of those kind of like creative things where, you want like big skies and like open spaces for creative thoughts, or you want like forest and like small confined spaces for like task work.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what you mean. You can hear the, soft lapping of the water on the beach, and just, being able to reflect in that time alone. How important is that, I guess, that time to reflect for you?
Oh, it's critical. So I would say I spend an hour or two outside on my back deck amongst the trees every day. So that's where I do the strategic thinking. That's where like the big ideas come. And then once a week or so, I try to get out down near the water and just kind of stare at it. And you give yourself that space, and the ideas just kind of come, and I get excited about them, and then come back and get in front of the screen and start making stuff happen.
Well, it's funny that, I used to burn the, the candle at both ends, they used to say. And I wonder, did you used to do that? And what did you find from overworking yourself?
Oh yeah, I put a wick in the middle. So I had burning at both ends and a triple wick in the middle. So about 20 years ago, a partner and I started a company. We sold it to a company called BuyingView. It got bought by Symantec, and I spent a year building our first product. like largely on my own. And it was the 80 and 100-hour weeks that you hear about in the tech industry. And it was exciting and I loved the control, but man, did it burn me out. And after doing it, I realized, yeah, you can do that once and maybe twice if you do the first one when you're young, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and that's some sage advice for young entrepreneurs out there who are thinking, I'm going to change the world overnight. You're just not going to do it, are you?
Exactly. So, putting in the time, putting in the work is important, but there comes a point where you get those diminishing returns where it wears you down and where that's the only thing you can think about. And so the big ideas stop coming. And if you ever work yourself, then you're really working against yourself.
In all of this, I always reflect on the importance of my family and friends and that time with them. Has your goals shifted somewhat towards more sort of those things that are more important than making money and building businesses, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. So I currently work from home, and it's usually me and the people I talk to online. And then I hang out with my wife. I see my parents. I see my sister sometimes because they're in the area. But I found that making the time to spend with other people and getting those other perspectives it's recharging. That the times that I spent just focused on work and only doing the things that make money, you kind of become boring. Like your stories aren't as good and you're not thinking as broadly. And so, you definitely need to get up away from the desk and, from work just in general and do other things that will then make your life more enjoyable. Otherwise, like, what's the point?
What's the point? I was thinking back to being near the beach where I'm living. There's lots of seaside cafes and restaurants. What sort of foods do you enjoy eating? Do you have a favorite?
I have an absolute favorite, and actually, my house smells like it right now. So it sounds strange, but my favorite food is Ethiopian. And I know it's a strange one. I had Ethiopian food for the first time in Baltimore several decades ago, and it tastes like nothing else. It's like you can kind of try to compare it to other things, but it's really its own flavor. Being in a small town in South Alabama, as you can imagine, there are not many Ethiopian restaurants nearby. I think the closest one is probably a 5-hour drive.
Oh, wow.
So I learned how to cook it, and I really enjoy it. I can only cook for 20 people. I can't figure out how to scale it down. And I was really lucky that my wife decided that she was going to take a stab at it. And so right now, my house smells like Ethiopian food, and I'll be having that this very night.
I love it. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, if we flip back the pages of time back to our childhood, I had a wonderful upbringing. How was your childhood? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I mentioned that I did early years in Lincoln, Nebraska. So the Midwest of the United States, kind of largely farm country, but we did not live on a farm. My dad was a college professor, taught at the university there. And so growing up was a typical U.S. Gen X experience where we rode bikes until the street lights came on and drank hose water and got to play with friends and stuff like that. Around the middle school, so 7th grade here in the U.S., we moved to the East Coast. So I lived just outside of Washington, D.C., and spent that through high school. And that whole experience was very different. So East Coast, very competitive, very cutthroat, but it has a certain energy to it that I probably wouldn't have gotten if we had stayed in Nebraska. So yeah, I look back and to me, it's all 80s music and riding bikes. So no complaints there.
It's funny you should talk about, the street lights coming on of the evening, because that was the time that I knew I had to come home. It's the only way I knew. And if
no cell phones.
No.
We didn't have to worry about making mistakes. It would go online forever. It was wonderful.
Well, there was one mistake. If I went home before the lights came on, I ended up having doing chores, so I never bothered going home too early.
It's an important one to file away.
Now, you mentioned your father. I wonder, through those early years, in those formative years, let's call them, who was the most influential for you to become the person you've become, do you think?
Oh, yeah. Parents definitely had a big influence. In particular, I remember my parents always read. So we would hang out, watch TV and stuff like that, like what I consider to be normal families. But they read more than anyone else I knew. And so reading was just sort of a thing you did in my house. And I didn't realize at the time, but that would have a huge impact on me. And so later on in life, when I just got interested in things, my first instinct was, okay, go find a book. And then once the internet came around, it was all over, because anything you want to learn, you can find somewhere.
There it is.
definitely a big influence there.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, back in the days of the dial-up internet and, waiting for a 1 megabyte file to download, I wonder, what was the first book that you ever read?
Ooh, I don't know the first one, but I can remember the first one that really stuck with me. It was a book called My Side of the Mountain, about a young boy who runs off into the woods and lives in a hollowed out tree and just essentially roughs it at 13 or 14 years old. I mean, again, this was the 80s, and so books like that seem feasible. These days they'd put you in jail. But yeah, it was just, I remember this idea of like, oh, I could be in control. And as a 12 or 13-year-old, when I read it, that really spoke to me. And then just been reading ever since.
They're a good source of both inspiration, knowledge, and I think about knowledge and the ongoing journey that I've had with it. How important is, information and learning, I guess, ongoing learning for you?
Oh, it's critical. So I work in technology and software, and so the everything's always changing.
Yeah.
It's just a deluge of information. So for me, not only reading it but filtering it has become super important. I've learned to start to kind of pick what is interesting, because there's so many things that seem interesting, but you can't learn it all. And so I really pay attention to the things that I keep coming back to. And so if there's an idea or a new technology or something that comes out, hey, great. But if I'm thinking about it, a day or two later, I'm like, oh, what was that thing? Then I know that there's like something there that's worth pursuing. Otherwise, I would just go crazy just reading all the time.
You strike me as somebody who's had a long entrepreneurial journey. It seems to be that obvious that it's been with you since a young age. Can you remember your first entrepreneurial experience?
Absolutely. So this was in elementary school back in Lincoln, Nebraska. I made kites.
Kites?
It was a Japanese style kite out of a couple of wood pieces and tissue paper. And I remember I made them and I sold them outside the office, and a couple of the teachers bought them from me. And I must have been, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I remember thinking, oh man, this is great. Like, I made something and somebody paid me money for it. And it was the beginning of everything.
It's such a basic equation that people seem to, over time as they grow up, overcomplex the whole idea of transferring value. How important has that early marketing, I guess, experience been to you now? And do you find yourself adding complexity sometimes when it's unnecessary? And what would you say to young entrepreneurs that might be doing that?
Oh yeah, so I'm old enough to have made almost all the mistakes. There's a couple left on the list, but overcomplicating them, definitely near the top. So as you pointed out, it's simple, right? There's value creation and value capture. And if you make something that people want, then the way to spread the word will become somewhat obvious, that you'll want to talk about it. Other people will want to talk about it. And if you focus mostly on the making something that people want, the value creation and the value capture will come later, and you'll build that audience and you'll be able to collect the money that it's worth and things like that. But a lot of folks think that it happens quickly, right? You always hear the story of the 10-year overnight success, and that's just such the case. Like, you have to plod along for a long time feeling like it's not working, and then all of a sudden it works kind of all at once.
Thank you again for the feedback. I was just wondering, for the sake of context, if you could share your educational and professional background. I know that you have been involved a lot with software development.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to have a computer early on. So again, elementary school, we had like an original IBM PC. My dad had it because he worked at the university. We had the dial-up modem where you had to slam the phone down into the cups.
I remember.
Yeah, so I remember typing in the basic programming for the Snake game out of a computer magazine back in elementary school, and just the fact that the computer responded, going back to that theme of control.
Yeah.
So I could make the computer do things, and as a kid, you don't have a lot of control, and so that was really powerful for me. In school, I was kind of like an student, really high test scores, really low test grades. So I got decent grades, but was never standoutish. When we moved to the East Coast, I ended up in a very good school district. So it was so good I couldn't avoid an education, and as try as I might. So I did okay in high school. Got accepted to University of Maryland, where I went to the electrical engineering program for a few semesters. dropped out. I caught the internet boom. So again, another fortuitous timing. I could spell HTML, so I could make a fortune. And so I did a little bit of internet work, and then that's been sort of the theme of my life. Like, see the next boom and start riding it. Like these days, I can spell AI, and so things are looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's looking like a solid future. And obviously, it's a great segue into the business Ecor Rouge. How did that come about?
So it originally started back when I was living in Baltimore, and I realized that even though I had a job, and I had a fantastic job, so I was the chief technology officer of a craft brewery. So it was computers and beer. I'm one of the few people I know that actually used what I did in college as a profession. I loved it, but there was always like other things that I wanted to do. And so Ecor Rouge became the way that I did my side projects. And it was simple stuff like pulling networks for a couple of guys that ran a restaurant that I really liked and helping them set up their website and things like that. So all the little like kind of freelancy type stuff that I wanted to do, it needed a legal home. And since I've been visiting down in this area, so the area where I live is called Ecor Rouge. It means the red bluffs, the red cliffs. Since I've been visiting this area, I was like, oh, I really like that name. It has rouge, which is red, and so I can have red in the logo. It turns out the sign that I kept seeing every time I visited is about 100 meters from my back deck. So on the road, there's a historical plaque that says this is the Ecor Rouge area, founded in the 18 whatever. And so I eventually I came back to the very origin. And because Ecor Rouge doesn't mean any particular thing, we could always change what we did. So it went from networks and websites to software, web apps, and things like that. And it just kind of gave me a place to put everything that I wanted to do on the side. And then eventually I made it not the side, I made it the main thing, and managed to go full-time independent.
That is a fascinating story. Thank you very much again for sharing. Now, what's your main role at Ecor Rouge? Am I saying that correctly? Ecor Rouge?
Yeah, Ecor Rouge. So believe me, Ecor Rouge, Ecor Rouge.
Ecor Rouge.
It's all roughly the same. So yeah, I usually say Ecor, kind of like echo.
Yeah, you're right. Got it.
So my main role is to find new services work. So a big part of our job is working with companies that need software or that have software that needs to be fixed or something like that. So they have something where technology will help them, and I know how to do that. And then the other part of the business is we have products that we build for ourselves. And so I help design those as well. So I have a partner who manages most of the product work, and we work together to make the products what they can be. So my role is to think about software, and the question I constantly ask myself is, how can I make this better for the user? Like, what would make this really cool? What would make this delightful? A lot of times we're building kind of businessy software, and so there isn't a lot of room for like whimsy or fun stuff like if we're building video games. But you can do things that delight people, where it is particularly fast or it is kind of magical in the way that it kind of predicts what things you're going to do. Things like that. And so that's where I sit out in the back deck for those, hour or two a day and think, how can we make these things great?
I've had a look at your website. There's certainly a lot of great information on there. We're going to be sharing that information in a little while with the listeners. But what's your long-term vision for Ecor Rouge?
That is a fantastic question, and one that I come back to over and over and over again. So the good news is I can just keep doing what I'm doing and be really pretty happy. I found a pretty good balance. Again, part of being old enough to having made all those mistakes that have things pretty well dialed in. But I'll tell you, the thing that I like the most is building our own products. And so there'll probably be a shift over time, kind of natural shift, where we do less services work. And a big part of what we do when we do the services work is get things to a place where they can be handed off. So we're not like a typical consulting firm where our goal is to be in there forever. It's more, we want to get people to where they're going and then kind of do a nice handoff. And we've actually had a couple of clients graduate from us where we got them up off the ground, and then they got to the point where things were going well enough they could build an internal team. We handed it off, and I'm as proud of those as I am for any long range contract. That it's great to see somebody take and run with it.
So when we're talking about products, just for the sake of context for the listeners who may want to learn more about it, What type of products are we actually talking about? Are they utilitarian? What are they?
Yeah, so one of the kind of core design principles that we have is everything we make needs to be useful in some way. That I know enough about sort of the dark patterns of social media and things like that that
Mm.
we could probably build things that make a lot more money. I just wouldn't feel good about it. And so everything has to be of utility in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of it is around helping people just do jobs better, more easily, get rid of like tedious stuff. So, as an example, we have a product called Email Vault that we built with another partner of ours. He used to work in the financial services industry, and the email archiving that they were required to have by SEC regulations was just crazy expensive. And so he and I had worked together for a while, and he said, "Hey, how hard would it be to build our own?" And I was like, "It probably wouldn't be that hard." And even though I was wrong, it was still possible. And so we built something that was pretty good, and then we kept improving it, improving it, improving it. And storing people's emails really isn't the most interesting thing. And so we started asking ourselves, what can we do to make this great? And so now we're pulling in lots of kind of features from the side, like, okay, well, if we have all the emails, then we can throw it at a large language model. We can fine tune something, have it do sentiment analysis, so we can answer the question, do I have any upset customers? We can do a bunch of other analysis, like how long does it take people to respond? And so who are the top performers? Who are the people that might need some coaching? And so kind of asking interesting questions about kind of boring data,
Yep.
but still helping people do a better job, because no one wants to sift through the thousands or millions of emails that come in to find that needle in the
Oh
haystack.
no, I think about ideation all the time, and I'm reading a book at the moment, and in there they were talking about ask yourself this question to create a great idea, and what would it be like if I could? And that's the way that they go about the ideation process. Is that a similar process that you would use for creation of your own products, or do you just look for pain points in the society?
So it's both, but there's also a third one. And I'm pretty sure it's from a Tim Ferriss book. He said, ask yourself the question, what is easy for you but hard for others? And one of the things I keep coming back to over and over in my career is stuff that I just had to learn and stuff that I've had to think through. And so being able to tap into sort of a vast experience of building various things to see that, oh, you could apply this thing that I did over here to this new area. So
Yep.
one of the things that I built a while back is a way to organize people's corporate policies so that we could tell them, are they complying with regulations and best practices? And again, kind of a boring thing, but it was really important at the time. This is what my partner and I built and got acquired. But really what it tapped into was a mixture of how you design databases and
Mm-hmm.
then how Solomon Brothers would create their index funds. My dad worked on Wall Street after he left academia. And we had talked about this one night at dinner, and it kind of stuck with me that these indexes had these certain properties. And so you could build indexes over and over and over again using the same properties. And so I applied those properties to how do you take squishy language from government regulations and map it to the prescriptive language of best practices, and then verify that you're doing that in your policy. So combining all those things is what really excites me, because even though I'm not like the best programmer, the best software designer, the best of any one thing, this unlikely combination of things can be put together in a way that people are like, wow, how did you come up with that?
Pretty powerful stuff. You touched on the elephant in the room earlier, and I suspect it's having an impact on the way that you think about ideation. AI. Let's talk a little bit about this. Is that something that you think's going to change the world? All I'm seeing is a flood of really cheap and nasty, to be honest, AI products flooding the market, and then there's some brilliant ones. What's your view on it?
Yeah, I think the AI boom is going to follow the internet boom. So if you look at early days of the internet, you had just these really ugly and sometimes hard to use websites. Then you had like the brochureware of companies. Like there was a period of people figuring out what to do. And now everybody takes it for granted, right? Now it's just like air. Nobody really sees it, but we all kind of depend on it.
Yeah.
I think we're going through that with AI, where it is like nothing else. So, people see it as magic, right? Just like the early days of dialing up, and, you connect to something across the world. You could be chatting with somebody or playing an online game across, the world. and we never had that before. And so I think we're following a very similar path, and I encourage people to look at what happened with the internet boom. So there's a lot of hype, a lot of excitement. There's that big, crash of the stock market. We'll probably see something similar, but it'll shake out, and this will be something that is just like air in the future, where everything kind of has a little bit of extra intelligence built in, and we don't notice it anymore. We just kind of take it for granted. A lot of things are built on top.
So what excites you? What products are out there that you would consider developing yourself right now with AI in them?
Oh man, anything that has to do with natural language. I gotta tell you, I love that because it's like science fiction. Like I remember growing up with, watching Star Trek, and they would talk to the computer, and you're like, you can't talk to the computer. You have to use a keyboard, and now you can talk to the computer. It's exactly
crazy, isn't it?
We've been seeing for decades. And so it's not that the computer understands you, right? That there's enough science and math behind it that I can kind of see, like, yeah, I know what's going on. But man, it's so close that you can kind of pretend like, oh, this thing understands me. And if nothing else, it kind of does something similar to what I'm asking it to do just by talking to it. So anything to do with natural language. I'll tell you what really excites me is the applications for people who have a hard time using computers. So everything from just general accessibility to people who are intimidated by it. So I think that the reason why AI is such an important thing right now is that it opens up the doors to computing to people who thought they just couldn't do it. That now it's so easy that they can tap into all these vast resources. And the people who are using AI to just create software, I think that's incredible. So even though I'm a software developer, the more people who can build software, the better it is. It's just like, making the steam engines more efficient. All of a sudden, people are, building more things and using more coal. I think it's going to be the same thing for our industry. There's going to be that short-term pain of the impression that you can replace developers with AI, but that's not really what's happening. What's happening is there's a lot of development that is really just tedious that AI is good at. And if you can take that away, then all of a sudden a pretty good developer who doesn't have to do that becomes a 5X or a 10X developer, and you can get more out of the people that you have, and they do more satisfying work instead of getting tied down to little boilerplate details.
That's excellent insight. I wonder, coming back to Ecor Rouge, who is your target audience? Who is your ideal client?
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. So our ideal client is somebody who is pretty certain that they can do something great with technology but isn't quite sure how to do it. And so we talk to people who are in, like I mentioned, my partner in financial services. So there's a lot that can be done with data in financial services. There's a lot that we're doing right now in cyber insurance. So it doesn't really matter what industry they're in. What they need to bring to the table is this idea of, oh, if we could use a computer to do X, Y, and Z, then we'd be in much better shape. And we can take that and really run with it. And so the way I usually describe the process is, if we can sketch out a cocktail napkin, then I can give you something to log into a couple weeks later, and we'll just kind of go from there and figure out what the rest of it is. And this kind of iterative process of how can you use the data that's already flowing into your company to make things better, along with, and how can you collect more so it kind of snowballs into even better than what you're doing today.
Yeah, that's the thing. People look for the bright, shiny objects when they're trying to go through the ideation process, but they forget about big data. Even if you're a small business, you've got a stack of data in the background about how people find you, what they're doing, and how you could use that data to become more efficient. That's an amazing insight. Now, I wonder, what's your primary, engagement channels to, find your clients and have conversations with them initially? Is it e-commerce? Is it retail? Is it online? What is it?
Yeah, so I hope this doesn't disappoint the readers, but right now it is almost all word of mouth. So again, having done this for a long time, I've worked with a lot of people, and what happens is when you work with a bunch of people and you make an impression, it kind of ripples out over time. And so I'll end up getting an email or a text or something like that from somebody who knows someone I worked with at some point in the last, say, decade. And they said, oh yeah, I was, having dinner with someone and they said I should contact you. I'm trying to do this thing. And what's really fun is one time I remember having a dinner with one of my friends, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm looking for a specific type of professional services person." And he's like, "Oh, I got a guy that you should contact." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." Like usually I'm on the other end of that where someone's like, "Oh, I got a guy." He's like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "I've been your name to some people. You've been that guy before."
Oh, fantastic. Now, I wonder, on your website, you've obviously got I think it's a 4-step process. I'm wondering if we can talk about that process from, onboarding and that type of thing, but how you go through the initial client engagement through to onboarding, through to ideation, development, and so forth, and whether or not it's important for those clients to have a business strategy. And if so, why would that be important at that early stage?
Sure. So what usually happens is someone contacts me and says something to the effect of, "Hey, I need to do this thing, and this person that you know in some way, shape, or form said I should talk to you." I said, "Great, send me what you have." So, and I've gotten all range of things. So sometimes it's a 4-sentence description. Sometimes they've gone through and kind of written up screens, like done sketches or whatever.
Mhm.
And so the first step is, again, go out to the trees and think about, okay, what are they really trying to accomplish? Because you have to start with the end, like kind of like you were saying earlier with ideation. What if I could? So what are you trying to do? What does done look like? What does success look like? So getting onto the same page with what we're trying to accomplish is the most important thing, because sometimes people come to me and they say, "Oh, I'm trying to do this thing." I'm like, "Oh, hey, good news. It already exists. Go check this thing out." And they say, "Oh yeah, that was perfect. Great." And I have enough to do that I don't need to chase everything that comes through. And so if I can point someone in the right direction, then so be it. If we go to the next stage, then I start to pare it back to them. Okay, this is what I think you're trying to do, and it looks like this. This is how I think people will use it. This is how I think they'll sign up and go through the flow. And this is what I think happens at the end. And what I found is almost everybody can design software if they don't know that's what they're doing. So if they're just answering questions, or if they're looking at something that you're saying and they're correcting you, then it's much easier than giving a blank sheet of paper and saying, "Tell me what you need." So I start with that kind of straw man approach of, this is what I think. And they'll come back with, "Well, here are the places where it's not quite right." And then we refine it, and we kind of come to a common understanding pretty quickly. And then our goal is put as much on the screen as possible, as quickly as possible, because it doesn't matter how much you write up. Most people can't imagine software in their head. They need to see it on the screen.
Yeah,
And once they see it
wireframe.
on the screen, I'm sorry, you like that?
A wireframe.
Yeah, like a wireframe, or sometimes we just build. And that's one of the things that's nice about like modern AI tools is they can help us build things very, very quickly. They don't always completely work, but that's okay, because again, we're just trying to put someone in that headspace of it's real, and I'm pretending that I'm using it. What would I want? And then the last phase of it is sort of the rest of the implementation, right? The part that's beneath the surface, the bottom of the iceberg, if you will,
Yeah.
where we take everything on the screen and we say, okay, this stuff needs to work. And that means storing data and sending emails and all that kind of stuff that nobody really thinks about. And then we either launch it for them and we operate it, or we turn it over and work with their people to get it deployed. And then that's the kind of offboarding part. So from idea to handing it off completely has sort of a standard flow. And depending on how much they already know about what they want, then the time is either spent up front figuring that out, or more towards the end because they already know it and they just need somebody to build it.
I love how you've shared this comprehensive, I guess, timeline, the story about how this all comes to fruition. There's obviously that early element of collaboration, but I also wonder about when do they, I guess, your clients have a bit of a back seat as such, and that you take over, or one of your team takes over in a true leadership role to make sure this project's on time, delivered as per the specifications. How does that happen?
So that is largely on me.
Yeah.
And usually what I tell people is, hey, you have a magic wand, right? You wave the wand and it will make it happen. And I can say that with a fairly large degree of confidence, having just built so many things, that it's been a long time since somebody came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do this thing." And I'm like, sorry, I just don't know how to do that. So there are some particularly tricky things in, say, like data science, where I'm like, that's not really my area of expertise. So I don't know how to do that, and you'll be better off working with someone else. But for everybody else, it's usually falls into certain patterns that I'm very comfortable with. And so it's on me to say, look, you don't have to understand the software. You just have to tell me how you want to fit into your business. And then it's my job to make you comfortable and show you things and, put it on the screen so that you know that it's real, and then you can react to it. And that allows us to really go back and forth where we're not talking in abstracts. So we do a little bit in the beginning, but I really try to make it as concrete as possible. And I'm telling you, almost everybody has used enough software at this point that they know what they're looking for. Like, they want it to work like, Facebook or Amazon or something like that. And so as long as you don't do anything too weird, then they already have their expectations, even if they're not experts at describing it.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Now, I'm wondering, what is the onboarding process when somebody new comes to find you, and, what does that look like? And do you have a form they go to? How does it happen?
Nope. It is always a call kind of like this, followed by me writing things up. And so the short version is, tell me what you know, and I'll tell you what we can do.
Well, there you go.
And some people really do have involved diagrams and wireframes and stuff like that. Maybe they've been shopping around to different dev shops. But for the most part, it's someone saying, hey, I think this is possible, or I want to build something like, something that already exists, but for this other vertical. How does that work? They kind of ask similar questions to what you're asking. And I tell them, hey, tell me what you know, and I'll tell you what we can do. And so after that initial call, then I have the ball, and it's on me to write up something that describes what I think the process is, how big I think it is, what's required, and I send it back. And we do all of this before we even talk about like how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, whatever, because nobody knows. Like, if somebody would come to me and say, hey, how much is this software going to cost? I have no idea.
How long's a piece of string? Yeah, that's
exactly.
Right. Yeah, no. Exactly. Tell us a little bit about Freelance Developer Coach.
Yeah, so that started probably about 10 years ago at this point, where I work with a lot of freelancers. So I've been kind of building freelance teams, using global marketplaces. So it used to be called Odesk, and then it merged with Elance, became Upwork. So I hire a lot of people from Upwork. And what I noticed was I was getting lots of really good technical talent that knew how to program, but their soft skills were pretty atrocious. Like, I mean, just completely lacking. These were people who did, and I was the same way early on, right? I was more comfortable interacting with computers than people, and that's kind of what took me to programming technology. But at a certain point, I realized, if all you do is interact with computers, then you can be replaced with a script, right? You can be replaced with software. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted to teach developers just enough of the soft skills and sort of the politics of work, so that they weren't constantly overlooked, so they could manage their own career, really. And so Freelance Developer Coach and then my blog, Big Swing Developer, are very similar in that I write a lot about how to think about your career, how to think about where you are, what you're doing, how to make more money. So one of the kind of popular things that I wrote about was how to make an extra $1 an hour, because for a full-time freelancer, $1 an hour is about $2,000 a year. And with a lot of the folks that I was working with, that was a substantial increase. And it turns out you could be worth $1 an hour more just by doing these little things, kind of like I was talking about, with taking the responsibility of documenting things up front, being willing to say, this is what I'm thinking, and have somebody come back and say, no, that's not quite right, but not forcing the client to have the blank screen. And a lot of the developers that I talked to, and the ones that I became really close with and worked with for a long time, would tell me, yeah, in our culture, failure is shameful. And so one of the reasons why they work with a lot of American startups, these guys in particular, is they wanted to kind of escape that, where they saw us, moving fast and breaking things, and they're like, how do you do that? And I'm like, you just do the next one. You don't really, carry that with you. You just say, oh, that didn't work. And so that's just part of my path of finding the thing that does work. And so, telling people it's okay to try something that doesn't work. Not everything works. And if you're doing everything that you can and everything's working perfectly, you're not doing enough weird stuff. So, throw in some weird and unique things that might not work, because you'd be surprised at what percentage of it does.
That's some sage advice there. Thank you very much. Now, you've touched on how many people that you've worked with over the years, and clearly you have a great word of mouth network. And I'm hopeful that the My Future Business Show can share more of that love with you and your business. So tell me, how does it make you feel when you see people's lives and businesses improve because of your involvement?
Oh, it's the reason I do what I do. So we have to make enough money to keep the lights on, and I live a fine life, but it's not particularly like glamorous. So I have my reasonable house here in South Alabama, and this is not a mansion in LA Hills or a penthouse apartment in Manhattan. So we bring enough money in to pay everyone, keep the lights on, and give out good bonuses. But we do it because we want to build something. That's like kind of at the core. We are builders. We want to create, and we want to create things that help people. And so anytime we can work with somebody and make something where they're like, wow, this is really great. Like, it's that feedback that really drives us. And that's really why I keep asking myself, what can we do to make this better? What can we do to make this software great? It's really chasing that feeling of somebody getting something that they wouldn't have gotten any other way. It's fantastic. There's nothing like it.
What a call. This has been absolutely fantastic. And, just to say once again how much I've really enjoyed you sharing some insights into your life personally and professionally. It's just been wonderful. But now, when people want to make contact with you, Jay, where are they actually going to go? What's the best website?
So probably ecorrouge.com. So ECORROUGE.com, Ecor Rouge. There's a form there that people fill it out. It comes to me, and I look forward to talking to people. As I said, we have plenty to do, and so I'm rarely out chasing work. At the same time, the whole shtick is I can scale up almost infinitely, because when a new project comes in, what usually happens is I hire another person or two, and I put them on an old project. So the rule is new people work on old things and old people work on new things, because they know that the way that we do things, we have this standard process and procedure that we guide people through. And so really it's just giving them the magic wand where they tell us, hey, this is what I want to exist, and maybe we're the ones to make that happen.
Fantastic. Well, there you go, everybody on the call today. I will be providing ecorrouge.com website below this post. No matter where you see the call, in fact, you're going to find these links back to Jay, his wonderful team, and all of his products and services. Jay, thank you once again for joining me on the My Future Business Show today.
It's been fantastic. Look forward to talking to you again.